Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Monday. Today is the 24th day of March, 2025. And in this second edition of Breaking News, we have four more huge stories. It's amazing, isn't it? Every time we meet here, there's always some huge stories that are breaking. We're never surprised, but always amazed to see what's going on because they all fit with what the Bible says our world's going to be like at the time of the end of this age. So let's look at them. Now, first story, there is a report out that Israel is actually eyeing a full-scale occupation of Gaza after the fighting is over. In other words, not have some other group temporarily rule it, but occupy it for an extended period of time. This is new and this is fascinating. Now, along that line, the IDF chief said we have no choice. Pressure must be increased on Hamas. They must ramp up the pressure. And they're doing pretty well right now, but it's not full scale. But we'll see what happens soon. And just like clockwork, a new hostage deal on the horizon. Egyptian negotiators say Hamas is said to agree to release of five hostages for a 7-week ceasefire. Five hostages for a 7-week ceasefire. And then we have this story. Hamas publishes Science of Life from hostages Yosef, Haim, Ohana, and Elkana, Bohbot. Two hostages that have been there in captivity for something like 523 days. Their first sign of life was published today after we have this possibility of a ceasefire and an extended period of time. So we're going to look at all this, see what it all means. Headline number one. Israel eyeing full-scale occupation of Gaza. This is from the Jewish News Service. Such a move would represent a departure for the Israeli military, whose previous leaders feared becoming entangled in the Gaza Strip. Israeli political and military leaders are considering plans for a fresh ground campaign in Gaza that could include a military occupation of the entire enclave for months or even longer, according to the Washington Post. Current and former Israeli officials briefed on the matter told the Post that the new tactics would likely include direct military control of humanitarian aid, targeting Hamas's civilian leadership, and evacuating women, children, and vetted non-combatants to humanitarian bubbles while laying siege to those who remain. Israeli officials emphasized to the Post that Jerusalem is still waiting for the outcome of the ceasefire talks, and no decisions have been made on whether or how to escalate the current phase of the offensive, which has so far consisted mostly of aerial bombardment. In fact, there's been no Israeli soldiers injured. If you note that during the time since this has all taken place again in the last 6 or so days. Now, according to people familiar with the planning, a full-scale invasion occupation would require up to 5 army divisions, potentially stretching the Israeli Defense Forces thin as reservists increasingly voice skepticism about an open-ended conflict. Amir Avivi, a former deputy commander of the military's Gaza division, told the Post that the IDF's campaign last year was constrained by disagreements between political and military leaders over tactics and strategy, as well as the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic Biden administration's concerns about you don't want to harm Palestinian civilians. Now, there's a new IDF leadership, and there's backup from the U.S. There's the fact that we have enough munitions, and the fact that we have finished our main missions in the north and can concentrate on Gaza, said Avivi. The plans are decisive. There will be a full-scale attack, and they will not stop until Hamas is eradicated completely. We'll see. Israeli officials indicate they remain willing to negotiate with Hamas through mediators before launching any large-scale invasion before dawn on Tuesday. Again, it's hard to believe it's only been 6 days. Israel carried out extensive aerial attacks targeting Hamas leaders and fighters while conducting limited ground raids. Hamas responded by launching rockets at Tel Aviv. An Israeli official, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss the sensitive negotiations, denied that Israel broke the ceasefire agreement. The official stated that Israeli authorities had presented their conditions for entering the second phase of the agreement on the 16th day of the truce, but Hamas rejected them. According to the official, Hamas then declined a bridge proposal by United States Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, to extend the ceasefire by 40 days in exchange for 11 living hostages. Instead, Hamas offered to release one American Israeli hostage, after which Israel decided to resume hostilities, while the official claim was permitted under the clause in the ceasefire agreement if talks were deemed to have broken down. This is true. So one of the places that Netanyahu insisted on, even when he did this with Biden, he says, if talks break down, we've got to be able to fight again. The official told the Post that Witkoff's proposal is, quote, still on the table, and we're back to negotiating by different means under fire. Hamas said on Saturday it was still considering the proposal. Witkoff says they turned it down. They're not interested in it. Israel claims it destroyed nearly all of Hamas's 24 fighting battalions, leaving only a few thousand fighters in Gaza. However, completely eradicating these remnants would require holding the territory, which some analysts suggest carries significant risks. Supporters of a more intensive and prolonged operation argue that last year's campaign only resulted in Hamas re-emerging from tunnels when the fighting subsided. They believe current political conditions favor increased military pressure and, if necessary, temporary occupation of Gaza. Then again, what's been really helpful for Israel, the Biden administration restricted weapon shipments to Israel, but President Trump has approved the sale of the 2,000-pound bombs, and Israel have said Israel consulted with the Trump administration before cutting off all aid to Gaza earlier this month. Now, on Friday, Katz threatened not only to temporarily occupy Gazan territory, but here's what we also mentioned, but to annex it if Hamas did not make concessions regarding the hostages. The more Hamas persists in its refusal, the more territory it will lose, which will be annexed to Israel. Unfortunately, this is necessary if Israel's going to neutralize Hamas from being a military force that they have to reckon with. All right, a second headline further confirms this. It's from the IDF chief. He says, no choice. Pressure must be increased. Now, they've done quite a bit in the aerial bombardment, but again, pressure must be increased on Hamas. Hamas is stalling for time, he said. This is a strategy, not a tactic, said the IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir. With the collapse of the ceasefire and renewed fighting in Gaza, Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, called for an escalation against the Hamas terrorist group. Hamas is stalling for time. This is a strategy, not a tactic, he said in security discussions reported on Channel 12 today, Monday. The IDF's actions are hurting them and causing instability, but they're not leading to the release of hostages. Therefore, we have no choice. We must increase the pressure. Meanwhile, the IDF continues to expand military operations in Gaza on Sunday, targeting key Hamas operatives in the infrastructure. They actually killed a senior Hamas operative named Ismail Barhoum in a precision strike inside the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. Hamas confirmed his death, identifying him as a political bureau member. Defense Minister Katz said Barhoum had replaced Issam Da'alias as Hamas's prime minister in Gaza and praised the successful strike. However, the IDF referred only to a key terrorist without naming him. So they're hitting some of the big guys now. And we had the ex-prime minister got taken out. Now the new prime minister was taken out also. It sounds like what happened with Nasrallah there in Lebanon. Remember that? When they took him out, they put on a replacement, and the guy lasted, just a few days, and he was taken out also. All right, now, along this line, we've got this. Because of the pressure, because of the fighting, here's the question. This is from Israel National News. New hostage deal on the horizon? Hamas said to agree the release of, listen to this, 5 hostages for 7-week ceasefire. They should live so long. Proposal would see Israel release hundreds of more prisoners and restore aid shipments. Hamas claimed to have responded positively, of course they would, to a new Egyptian proposal for a ceasefire between Israel and the terror group, according to a report by the Associated Press today, Monday. Israeli sources cited Channel 12 News confirming that Egyptian mediators had presented a new proposal and that Israel recognized, quote, slight positive indications, but cautioned that large gaps remain, I would say. According to the Associated Press, the new proposal would see Hamas release 5 living Israeli hostages, including the American-Israeli soldier Idan Alexander. In return, Israel would be expected to, get this, guarantee a 7-week ceasefire, release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and restore humanitarian aid to Gaza on a, quote, large scale. According to a report from the Qatar newspaper Al Arabi Al Jadid, the Egyptian proposal also included a commitment by Hamas to provide detailed information on the living, dead, and wounded Israeli hostages, along with photographic proof. In addition, the proposal was said to include a commitment to enter into more in-depth negotiations. Now get this, over a timetable for the release of the remaining hostages in exchange for what? A gradual and final withdrawal of the IDF troops from the Gaza Strip. Again, they're not going to leave the Gaza Strip until after you're long gone. Hamas, sorry. Israel's Khan News also reported Hamas may be willing to release the remaining living hostages in exchange for several concessions that would need to be negotiated. This is expected to include an end to the war and a withdrawal of all forces from the Gaza Strip. In other words, we'll give you all the hostages, you just quit and leave, and we can rebuild and start all over again. Now, this is interesting here. The Tikva Forum, a smaller and more hawkish group of hostage families than the mainstream hostages and missing families forum, condemned reports of the Egyptian proposal. Another proposal and another selection. Once again, individual hostages are singled out and the fate of other hostages is being decided, the forum said. We now demand that the Prime Minister and all members of the cabinet strongly oppose and not allow another selection among the hostages. The Israeli government must take them all out at once in one bus, and until then, increase military pressure, occupy territory in the Gaza Strip, and prevent all humanitarian aid, electricity, and water from reaching Hamas. Sounds like a good plan. At the end of the first phase of the ceasefire, Israel did cut the aid as well as the remaining electricity line to the enclave in a bid to pressure the terror group to release more hostages. These moves, of course, were seen as part of the escalating steps by Israel. It could ultimately lead, we'll see it soon, to a resumption of a full-scale war. And so, in absence of any concessions by Hamas, is what Israel plans to do. All right. So anyway, this is what's going on right now. And you've got this new hostage deal proposed that Egypt, of course, has proposed, and Hamas jumped onto that because all it does is really help them in every single way. And so, to complicate matters, though, tonight, Israeli time, this story broke, and this does complicate matters. Hamas publishes signs of life from hostage Yosef, Haim, Ohana, and Elkana Bohbot, some of the Israeli national news. The Hamas terror organization published a video with the sign of life from Yosef, Haim, Ohana, and Elkana Bohbot, who were abducted on October 7, 2023, and have been held hostage for 535 days. Per the request of the hostage families forum, the footage will be published after the family's approval. Last month, Yosef Haim's aunt, Hannah Mastronov, told Ynet News that the family received an indication that he is alive. Mastronov said that the information was received after a recent hostage release. We have a clear indication that he is alive. We remained under the radar until now, but now we're coming out. We chose to speak to the media after the release on Shabbat, that Saturday. Our feelings are really not simple. Ohana is 24 years old. He was abducted from the Supernova Festival. His mother revealed that he and a friend assisted the wounded at the festival and took them to ambulances. Bohbot turned 36 last Saturday. He was also abducted from the music festival where he was working. Now, obviously, it's no coincidence that this hostage video surfaces right after Egypt puts forth this new proposal that Hamas has supposedly agreed to, a proposal that gives them time to regroup militarily, as well to receive more aid, receive more fighters back. The renewed fighting by Israel has certainly caused them to do all of this. Now, the question is this. Will Israel again capitulate to only receiving a few hostages with another long ceasefire period? Or will they do what Netanyahu claimed? In other words, what they would now do, namely negotiate while keep on firing. With the release of the video of the two live hostages, of course, there'll be a tremendous outcry from many in Israel to agree to their release, no matter the cost and no matter the timing of the ceasefire. On the other hand, as we just mentioned, the families of the hostages who would not have their loved ones released would strongly protest delaying their eventual freedom, as well as because the health of all of them continues to deteriorate day by day. So we'll see what happens. It's a difficult situation, and we'll have more on this tomorrow as the situation develops. So again, we need to really continue to pray for all of this. This is very, very difficult for the leaders there. It's very Israel, difficult to know what to do, and just difficult all around. And so, again, as Bible believers, we will pray. Like we said, we know how it's all going to turn out in the end. Scripture tells us that, but in the meantime, we have no idea what's going to happen. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.